Okay, hello everybody and welcome to XYZ Masterclass on the future role of artificial intelligence in filmmaking. Artificial intelligence is probably the most talked, discussed, and buzzed topic at the moment in the industry and globally in general. Today, you will hear very interesting insights and gain a lot of valuable information about this topic, so please take notes. I also know that many of you listen to this masterclass only via audio, you only listen to this, but today I encourage you to also pay attention to the visual side of it because there will be material shown to you. So please keep your eyes and ears open. I can see that we have old participants here, welcome, and new ones, welcome you too. For the new ones, I want to give a little bit of background, a little bit of context. XYZ Masterclasses are organized by Film Tampere and XYZ Films. XYZ Films is a Los Angeles-based independent studio focusing on genre content, and Film Tampere is a regional film commission in Tampere, Finland. We offer beautiful locations, talented service providers, and also very efficient cash rebate from 10% up to 15%. But besides that, I'm glad to say that we are known as a producer's best friend. We are smart, modern, sustainable, business-driven film commission. Our collaboration with XYZ Films started in 2020 when feature film Duel was shot in Tampere, Finland. Duel, directed by Raleigh Stern, was the first USA feature film that was shot entirely in Tampere, Finland. As always, we have beyond amazing panelists and good audience. Today we have Joe Penna, Ryan Black, and Katri Manninen. Welcome.
Thank you.
And as a moderator, we have Aram Derchakian, co-founder and producer at XYZ Films, beloved friend of Film Tampere, and also a true Finnish ambassador. Welcome you as well, Aram.
Thank you so much, Fani.
Before I let you get into it, I want to say a couple of things about the practicals. Please remember to keep your microphones turned off during the masterclass. This session will be recorded and the recording will be sent to your emails afterwards within 2 days. If you have any questions or comments, please share them in the end of the masterclass when we have the Q&A section. The panel itself will take around 1 hour and 10 minutes, and the Q&A section is 20 minutes, so stay till then. If you have any technical issues, any problems, please write them down on the chat box or send me email fani.heinonen@businesstampere.com. I think I got all covered. Okay.
As usual.
As usual. Thank you so much for being here. Lean back and enjoy the masterclass. And please, Aram, you can take it from here.
Bonnie, thank you so much. Hello, Finland. Hello, everybody watching all over the world. Thanks for taking time today. There's a lot of other things you could have been doing. I think this is going to be a good use of it. So want to start by thanking Film Tampere for all their ongoing support. You know, we've been working with Finland, with Film Tampere, with Business Finland, with various other partners and parties since 2019. And for XYZ, that's been an absolutely amazing experience. For context, I'm Aram. I'm one of the co-founders of XYZ, LA-based independent studio, as Fani mentioned. We, as a company, have a privilege of making films all over the world with amazing and interesting artists and talent, including Joe Penna, who's on this Zoom. We've made 2 movies with and hope to make many more. We, as Fani mentioned, we produced Duel and financed Duel in 2020 during COVID, starring Aaron Paul and Karen Gillan, which was the first American film shot entirely in Finland. Since then, we've also shot a film called Spalta with Nick Frost that is in post-production right now. A television series called Conflict, which is in post-production. And we brought a big chunk of a Netflix action film starring Tom Hardy and Forrest Whitaker to Tampere for VFX as well. So, and on top of all that, we have a film financing fund with Helsinki-based IPR VC. So the roots run really deep for us in Finland for XYZ. We're huge fans of the culture, the country, and the filmmaking industry over there. So these panels are always a great opportunity for us to continue to make inroads and hopefully learn as much from this as the audience will learn as well. But that's enough about XYZ. I want to get into our panelists. There's a lot to talk about. AI is a fascinating topic, and we have some very well-qualified folks here. So if it's okay with the panelists, I'd love to just say your name and let you give a little brief introduction about who you are. And then we'll get more specific into what you do and how it relates to AI as we get further on. So Ryan, why don't we start with you? Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. My name is Ryan Black. I am head of acquisitions for Flawless AI, a really cool AI company working in the film industry. And we'll dive into more about that later. A little bit about my background. Before joining Flawless AI, I worked for 14 years at Lionsgate. Most recently there, I was VP of acquisitions and development for a division called Grindstone Entertainment Group.
Excellent. Thanks, Ryan. Next up is Katri.
Hi. I suppose I saw that there were many familiar names, but in the list, but I still introduce myself. So I'm Katri Manninen. I'm a professional screenwriter, published author, transformative coach, and currently a doctoral student at Aalto University, where I research how working with AI impacts the writer's experience when they are developing together a TV show concept or film concept. So I'm very, very excited to be here and talk about this thing that is I'm currently obsessed about, which is AI, using AI different ways.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then last but certainly not least, Joe Penna.
Debatable whether or not it's the least. Yeah, Joe Penna here. I a screenwriter, film director. I've worked with Aaron Lott on two of the feature films that I've directed. I have also produced one feature, and yeah, starting to use AI for feature films. And now I was VP of applied machine learning at a company called Stability AI for a while, and now I'm exploring how AI can be best used for the feature film space and TV and games and things like that.
Great, thank you. Okay, Joe, I want to start with you since we just ended with you. Really simple, fun, basic, low stakes, two-part question, which is number one for our audience, what exactly is AI? And then the even more simple one, how long before it takes over the world and eliminates humanity?
So good questions. Good questions. Both very, very easy to answer. So what is AI? You know, when people talk about you know, I'll stick specifically with the film industry here, right? Because we can talk about large language models, we can talk about generative AI in terms of images, you know, we can talk about different types of AIs for we're going to be talking a lot about generative AI, which is basically, if I tell you like, oh, I'm taking two pieces of bread and I have some cheese in between, I'm going to put them all, and some deli meats, I'm going to put it all together into one delicious blank, right? 90% of the time, 99% of the time, the next word there is going to be sandwich, right? So basically AI is when you're speaking about large language models, is exactly that. You know, it's just trying to figure out what's the likely next word. What is it? You know, what's it going to be? Which makes it so that it can be generative. So when it figures out, yeah, okay, if you start a sentence like this, most of the time you're going to end it like this. You're going to do this, you're going to do that to it, and things like that. So it's the same thing with image generative AI. When you type in the word dog, most of the time the images that it was trained on are going to look like this or like that. You know, a photograph of a dog is going to look like this, or a drawing of a dog is going to look like that. So there's these little things called tokens. You know, so that's generative AI. You know, and people think that it's quite new, but the VFX industry has been using AI for quite a while. Like I used the program back when I was a rotoscoper, or like a motion tracker called Buju, which basically just it was taught cameras that was tracked by humans one by one by one, those paths versus a video. All of a sudden, when you can just track any video from there on that it's kind of sort of have seen. So that's the kind of thing that we start to think about, like, is not whether or not we can use AI, is how much of it should we use, where should we use it, where is it okay, where is it not okay, when should it be talked about? Because these kinds of models have been used for years and years, 10, 15 years in the industry. When's it gonna take over humanity and destroy us all? Anywhere between 2 months and 2 decades and 2 nevers. We'll see.
Sounds about right.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks, Joe. We'll come back to you in a minute because I know you've been doing, and I've seen it firsthand. You've been doing a lot of work in the AI space, and a lot of exploration in the film AI space, and have recently actually brought that to life on a project. I'll let you speak about that as much as you're comfortable with, and also show us some visuals on things you learned along the way. But we'll circle back on that. Ryan, I want to segue over to you. XYZ's had the privilege of also working with you and with Flawless, and I think you guys are doing something really interesting that I'll let you describe and maybe even show a little bit better, because I think I'm obviously biased, but in my opinion, it's a really great example of the getting away from the doom and gloom of what AI is, and actually looking at the practical of how to make a existing technology, in this case dubbing, which everybody hates, something that could actually be improved upon with AI. But I'm saying too much. I'll let you speak about what you guys do, and if you have anything you can share, that'd be really cool to see.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it might be easiest just to show a real quick video that does a much better job of explaining exactly what Flawless Tech does than I could. So I'll just share my screen real quick and show everyone that, and then I'll explain a little bit more about it. 1 second here. Okay.
Now we're stuck on this stupid tower in the middle of nowhere. And I don't blame you. And now we're stuck on this stupid. Now we're stuck on this stupid freaking tower in the middle of freaking nowhere. And it's all my fault. ¿Qué veces serio de escatanayos? Y es todo por mi culpa.
Okay. Well, hopefully everyone's connection was good there, and it was, in fact, the perfect lip sync that it is in the video. But so the easiest way of describing what Flawless is all about. So we have 2 products. One is called TrueSync, which is a new way of dubbing foreign films with a perfect lip sync amongst all languages. And then another product called Deep Editor, which is a new way of basically a new way of doing ADR, or not having to bring a whole cast and crew back to do reshoots. So what you saw, the first bit of that clip from the movie Fall, in that case, it was a censorship issue that led us to kind of doing these, what we call deep editor or AI reshoots. And that was essentially Lionsgate wanted to take the film out wide, but because it was going to be rated R, they weren't going to be able to do that. And they basically asked if we could help get it into a PG-13 version. So we were able to remove 30 to 40 F-bombs and get it down to a PG-13 by having it be frickin' and just other sentences that could end up passing for the PG-13 version there, but still maintaining the integrity of what the dialogue was supposed to be and not being out of sync and not having to. In the case of Fall, as you saw, these 2 women are up on a tower 1,000 feet in the air, and there's not really a way of cheating those lines in traditional way of doing ADR, where you just get a line on the back of someone's head, or just come up with some other line that may not be exactly what you want. In this case, we were able to have them say exactly what we needed, and it appears as though those lines were actually shot. And so one of the tools is really a production tool, the Deep Editor, to help in the post process. And the other tool is a distribution tool, the TrueSync, which is helping to enable foreign content to be more accessible globally, and and just really make the experience more immersive by not taking you out of it, either having to watch subtitles on the bottom of the screen or kind of noticing that, oh, that's out of sync, that doesn't look right. And it's just really all about making the viewing experience better.
That's awesome, Ryan. Thanks. I have a lot of follow-up questions on this. I think it's an amazing use case, and we'll come back to that. But before we do, I want to flip over to Katri. Katri, you just utilized, my understanding is just utilized AI for a screenplay that's on track to shoot this summer in Tampere. And I'd love to hear more and show more if you have anything on basically what this movie is and how AI was a useful component or tool for you, especially considering, I think that the first instinct for a lot of screenwriters is that, oh no, AI is coming for our jobs, with ChatGPT and everything else. So it's really interesting and refreshing to hear that somebody actually used it as a tool to create their screenplay, and congrats on having that be on track to shoot. So we'd just love to hear more about a little bit more about the project, about how you used it, and what your plan is with it going forward.
Great, thank you. I was going to show you a video that I did by myself, just using AI, but it's so horrible that after that, that perfect lip sync, I'm not going to ruin that amazing feeling that, oh, we're going to have amazing video lip sync things. But I can tell you that even as a screenwriter who doesn't know who doesn't know anything about like video making with AI, I was still able to do like a 1.5-minute long short film, and I was very proud of myself. But yes, I use AI. First of all, I use AI every day for everything. And I do think that that's the way to go if you want to be master it. So I use it, of course, for work, for writing, but also for like my research that I'm studying right now, but also like planning my research, for my private life, other work stuff, and so on and so forth. And I totally get, that I understand the writers who are like, AI, this is horrible, this is bad, because when I first tried AI or large language models, ChatGPT, back in, I think it was March or something, 2023, I wasn't impressed because I didn't understand how to use it. And I do think, I don't know how many of you have actually tried ChatGPT, especially the worst version, like the 3.5 version. You might be, I understand if you're kind of discouraged after using it, like thinking, what's the point? It doesn't give me, I asked something about myself, and it gave me, like, said wrong things about me, because it's not a Google, it's not like a librarian who goes to see, like, get that information and give it to you. It's like Joe said, it's, Joe? Yeah, Joe said that it's kind of creating on the spot the story. So it's also like kind of my mission to teach other screenwriters, and I'm going to share you the slide where I list the ways I used AI to do this, or used in one project. And this was the first project that I was able to actually use AI with, because I haven't, at this point, I don't have any other like script writing projects going, or I didn't have any other script writing projects. So this was the first project where I used it. And so one thing I think all writers that I know hate the most is writing synopses with, from the scripts that they've already written, and I'm not exception. It used to take me 5 days to write a synopsis, because it took me 4.5 days of going around the house like, I would have to write a synopsis. I hate it so much. And then I would write it in half an hour. But this time for Ella and the friends to get I saw that there was someone from Finnish Film Foundation. So I'm kind of like afraid to reveal this truth. But my producer, Alexi, Hyvärinen called me and said, like, Katri, we are applying for the production funding from CES, and we need a synopsis for the application. And our script had already changed so much from the first versions that the old synopsis didn't fit. So I was still on the phone with him, and I said, okay, just a minute. And I gave ChatGPT 4, which is better, and you should always try to use that and not the 3.5, the cheap version. I gave it like instructions, what kind of a synopsis. You are a master of writing marketing synopsises. And then I gave it explanation, what kind of a synopsis I want. And I gave some background information about the script. And I put the script there, attached the script there, and I was still on the phone. It took me maybe a minute or two, minute to write that whole description and add the script. And then I pressed go, and I talked to Alexi, and then 1 minute later I was like, okay, here's the synopsis, and then I started reading it, and he was like blown away. Of course, it wasn't perfect, there were some misunderstandings, but it was a great first synopsis. And that's if you don't use it for anything else, try it for synopsises. It will change your life. So for this book version adaptation of a book, I didn't use AI because I did it before that, but I have tested it with other books projects, and I can tell you that it does pretty good job of breaking down a book. And with the tests I did, I think it got like 60% or 70% of the episode, like the scenes correctly, which means 70% of less work or writing for me. Of course, I always have to anyway check what it does, but it can speed up quite quite a lot the adaptation thing. For me, it's very hard to kind of see, if I have a screenplay, it's very hard to see how the screenplay, the structure of the screenplay, if it's just in a screenplay version with dialogue. So that's why with this Ella and Friends, at some point we were like, okay, we have to fix there's something wrong with the story structure, but it was kind of hard for me to see it. So I asked ChatGPT to turn it back to outline. So kind of remove the dialogue and just, do the short synopses for each scene. And then after that, I actually gave it the treatment or the outline and asked ChatGPT to kind of help me analyze, because we had a feeling that the kids were not active enough in all the scenes. And that's, instead of me going through it and trying to see my word, text in with new eyes, I had a ChatGPT do it, and it actually was able to show me, or I was able to realize where the problem was, and I was able to fix those scenes. There is in the beginning of the show, or the film, we have this Rube Goldberg machine, where you drop a ball and then it goes somewhere and goes somewhere. And I'm not expert in this, and so instead of going crazy trying to come up with like what kind of things they could be, I gave ChatGPT for image of a kids' classroom, Finnish kids' classroom. This is because it takes place in school, and I explained what I wanted, and then I asked it to come up with different things or different parts of a Rube Goldberg machine that could take place there, and it gave me like 30 examples, and then I chose from there and changed the things so I could actually have that. And it took me, again, like normally it would have taken me hours to do it, or even longer. Now it took me like half an hour to do it. And then we need character descriptions, and also to kind of understand better the characters at some point, because this is a book series and there's a lot of things written about these characters in the internet. I got like myself found some articles, plus I had my own materials, and then asked ChatGPT to kind of write shorter new character descriptions, and this way I was able to find new information about the characters myself, just to get deeper. And this was before the rewriting parts. And then there was a point where I wanted to know what kind of things could a cowboy have in his backpack. And olden days I would have gone to Google it, and then 3 hours later, I have ADHD, so 3 hours later I would have found myself reading about the history of cowboys in Mexico or something like crazy. So now I asked ChatGPT, Google Bard, and Claude 2 the same question: what would a cowboy, you are an expert in cowboys, what would a cowboy have in their backpack? And I checked those that when they had the same answers, then I knew that these are probably the most likely things to be in the cowboy's backpack. And I found it something I could use in the script. Later we cut those scenes away, but I didn't waste time. Again, it was like 5 minutes. And yeah, this is what I do a lot. And this is my another recommendation is that try to use, like I use usually three bots side by side, and I give them the same question and see how they answer. And then that way I can kind of have them compete against each other and then be more critical about the things I do. So these are some of the things I use AI in this project, but I can see I can come up like other ways of using, and I have other use cases, but I think I'll let others speak for a moment and we can come back to those later.
I'm on mute. Katri, thank you. This is fascinating. And I have more questions and follow-up that we'll come back to in just a second, but this is really cool. I want to switch back to Joe. And with Katri, a lot of what she's talking about is ChatGPT and text-based, idea-based. And I want to contrast that with a lot of what I know you've been doing and working on, which is visual-based, world generation, world creation, set extensions, actor tweaking, and everything in between. So wanted to just, as much as you're comfortable speaking and sharing, I've had the fun through our work experiences. I've had the fun insights to see some of the work that you've done. And I know you did a ton of work on a project that you produced recently with Annie Kendrick's directorial debut. So in as much as you're comfortable speaking and showing and sharing whatever you can, it'd be really great to show our audience the power of AI in terms of what that can actually look like on screen.
Sure, yeah. I can talk a little bit about that project here. So I was tapped to produce her directorial debut, and we had a need back then to create some to get some images for a photo album that I'll talk about in a second. At the time, AI imagery was something like this, right? Version 3 was out of something called Midjourney at the time. But this is what our movie looked like, a regular movie, there were some photographs that we needed for a photo album, and we were going to be really, really, really close on the images, and we needed both images of some of the actors that were there, and then images of nearly 100 different people. And we just there wasn't enough people in Vancouver at the time that were going to be available for us to be able to hire, and two, we couldn't be able to afford it, to dress everybody in 70s, do 70s makeup with them, taking film images. We were going to have to not play that moment, that very, very important moment, on the actual prop, right? Don't want to give too much away about the movie because it's not out yet. But then I started reading into some of this AI tech, and I saw that there was something called Dream Booth that was out, and something called Stable Diffusion, right? And I'm like, okay, I think that there's a way for me to teach these AI models how to do realistic faces and realistic imagery photographs, right? So I tried it with myself to see if I was in the model. I was trained on the entirety of the internet. We can talk about whether or not that's okay in a sec, definitely not to use in a final kind of approach, but like I wasn't in there because when you search for Joe Penna, the model actually breaks it up into different tokens, like we talked about before, Joe and Pen and Ah. So usually it gives me, a guy named Joe holding a pen in the ancient city of Na or something like that, And Dream Booth, I started reading into it, as much of it as I could understand. But the idea is that you take usually an object and you teach the model that new object. So, you give it a new token. Here, just bracket V, which is this specific backpack with those specific stickers in this specific way. And I started wondering whether or not it would be able to learn human beings, right? A specific human being's face. So this is the model trying to learn what I look like. I gave it a bunch of images of me, And you can see that it went from just a bunch of random men to less random. Okay, now they all have beards. One guy there had my six-pack abs, that I saw flashing for a second. And starting to try to learn, but we have a whole bit on our heads that's just to recognize people. So it needed to be perfect, right? And my gosh, I was surprised that, it only took $400 in GPU training costs, as opposed to the thousands and thousands of dollars that, tens of thousands of dollars that this would have taken otherwise. And believe it or not, this was the very, yeah, at first it wasn't working out too well. Um, you know, maybe after a long night of drinking, this is what I look like, but I needed to look a little better. But prompt engineering is a big thing, right? So just asking for a picture of Joe Penna is not okay. You have to ask, like, Joe Penna is cool, he's handsome, his photograph, and that also wasn't working. And also I had a bunch of training images that had me and like slightly like my wife next to me there. But it didn't know what my wife looked like because it didn't have enough pictures of her. So it just kind of sort of put my face on hers, and it thought that that's what I was.
Kind of looked like you were in love with yourself. Yeah, a little in love with yourself, maybe.
Which may or may not be true. I also had this image in there, trying to train it in like completely different poses. I thought that would have been helpful, but it just learned that I had very large hot dog hands. This was before the famous movie came out with that, maybe the size, I was like, oh, okay. So at least the face there is looking nicer, but for some reason it thought that I was Legion. So eventually when I started training, changing some of the training parameters, started realizing, oh, if I do this a little bit more, a little bit of that, I started getting closer. Weirdness there with my eyebrows. I'm not sure why, and I'm very much not sure what I'm wearing on the first image. And slowly it started becoming better and better and better. And eventually I started getting to a place where I could prompt the model to do my face in specifically something called out of domain is what we test for, different styles. So picture of Joe Penna as Van Gogh, does it just draw something like the left, which is what it did before, which is Van Gogh and trying to kind of sort of toss me in there versus the right, the daguerreotype of Joe Penna. I've never taken a daguerreotype. I'm not that old, but before and after there on the right, and yeah, like it can kind of sort of invent that Joe Penna as a character in Game of Thrones. This was before, this was after. As Iron Man, this is what it learned, right? So of course I started putting myself into all of my favorite movies, and also different approaches. Right. Joe Penna is a cool, awesome, handsome male model or whatever. This was before, the anatomy is completely incorrect and you can do some, some kind of in painting. And now I can finally get to see what I would have looked like if I were to be a male model, which I made far too many images for, I will say. My wife is like, this is what you could look like if you worked out. And I said, I'm just going to go make images for a movie that I'm currently working on. So started to realize this is definitely useful for pre-production. You can do some kind of like lighting ideas, maybe a little bit for cinematography, but would it work for something like this is what I needed, right? Very specific, like 1970s younger women, because it's a serial killer movie, right? He had images of all these women, right? Like, is it going to be able to do things like this? Is this ever going to?
And Joe, just to take a step back, because you already touched on it, but I want to make sure the audience understands. This was a situation where you have in the plot of the film, you have a serial killer who has collected a diary of photographs of his victims, of men and women that he became infatuated with, and kept souvenirs or whatever of the photos he took of them.
Yeah, exactly.
So that specifically in all the modeling you were doing as you were playing with AI and figuring out how to make yourself look more photorealistic, this
Yeah,
led to the exercise. This led to the exercise in the movie of, oh no, we have to have a book that is not just a book that's referenced to, it's a book that we're going to see these photographs and flip through. And we are going to be, and I'm going to let you speak again. I just want to make sure the audience has context, but then it was twofold. One, where are we going to go find 1,000 people and do costume and photography and all this stuff for extras for a day of work that's going to potentially add 30% to your budget on something that, granted, is important but not necessarily important enough to destroy the film in terms of being able to actually make it. So then your task was, okay, how do I figure out how to do this using AI?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thanks for that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
It would have been about $150,000 for that because we would have had to give everybody COVID tests, do hair and makeup, hire probably a couple of photographers. Had to dress a bunch of flats in the studio so that it didn't look like we took them all in the same location or the same days. Some outside. We tried to license the images. We tried to just get like as many images of friends as possible, and yeah, they all had to be the same aesthetic too because it's the same photographer, right? It's an important part of the story that he's actually a great photographer, right? And yeah, we didn't know whether or not we were going to be able to create these photorealistic images, and these are AI photographs. This one, these two are here. In fact, overnight, I was able to create about 300 different images for Anna to choose from, and she said this one, this one, this one, this one, that one, right? And then,
and Joe, just to interrupt again, everything that we're looking at in this everything we're looking at, none of the people in this mosaic are real people.
None of them are real people. There weren't the ethical issues of using the photographs of the victims, or the ick that a lot of the actors were like, I'm not going to come in for a full day just to take pictures and to be flipped through in some serial killer's book. We literally couldn't find enough people who wanted to do it. So yeah, all of these images, a lot of them blacked out because of things like nudity. We were able to get what we needed for that. It's, and in the film it you can't even tell, right? So that kind of mindset is is going to the generative mindset when you can create out of thin air, once we have the models that we need, right? You can create out of thin air whatever you need for a film. It's not only going to help things like marketing, but it's also going to help things like pre-production for another movie that I worked on called Stowaway. Arm, you were a producer on that. We took a lot of crew stand-ins. Okay, just the crew, something like this, something like that. That we're going to be able to switch them over to be the actual actors, so you can get a little bit closer to the final look of the film. Right. Once we have better models, we might be able to outpaint. So something like this, for example, we wanted to see more of this tiki bar, the thatched roofs and things like that. So you're able to take that initial frame and then just outpaint the outside of it. So that's the difference there, right? The movie did end up selling for $11 million, and I'm going to take full credit for that. Definitely not anything else about the movie. That No, I'm kidding. So we're seeing things now. For example, de-aging Tom Hanks, there Robin Wright. So many things like that. If I think about Stowaway, like so many parts of that film already could have been not replaced by, but added to by AI. For example, we had some pre-visualizations that would have been a lot easier, right? You could do things like rotoscoping. For example, here we had this entire setup for pre-visualization that was like a game engine. You can see I have like 2 Xbox controllers, 1 phone in the middle, this whole like clunky device here, and I'm trying to figure out how are we going to shoot this thing to look like space, right? And once I get the shot here, I'm like, it's not quite right. So I just rewind it and do it again. But for that, we needed a whole video game that was generated of the movie. Something like that's going to be able to be done generatively in the future. And doesn't even need to be with new productions. Things like Star Trek Next Generation. You know, the fans have been asking for a widescreen version, but the widescreen version has C-stands and lights because they never shot for that, like The Wire did, for example. Eventually, that's going to be able to be painted out. And in painting is the name of that, right? Things like lighting. If a cloud goes over while you're shooting it on the day, you don't have to wait. You don't have to stop production. You can just change lighting afterwards, basically. Not only lighting, but you can also change the angle. This is one performance that might be able to be changed. Like, okay, actually, let's shoot a little bit from here, a little bit from there. So things that can only happen once, like shooting with animals or shooting something like a process trailer. You know, it's a pain to shoot because a pain to like the turnaround times to relight every single angle, right? Overall, there are parts of filmmaking that, at least for me, will forever be exciting to do with humans right then and they're figuring out like what the launch screens look like, waddling around in an astronaut suit, having a doctor teach you how to suture. That's what I love about filmmaking. It's different for everyone, but that's what I love. You know, what I'm excited about AI to reduce or remove is the bits of annoying process that actually get in the way of creativity, that get in the way of telling the best story possible. So instead of a replacement mindset, I'd love to think of it as to what are the best tools that we can have for telling better stories.
Wow, that was great. Thank you, Joe. I mean, so far, the theme from all three of our panelists is about AI being a tool. You know, not a replacement factor, not a let's get rid of the humans and live in Terminator 2 world, but more of a ability to give the director more tools, to give the actor more flexibility, to give the lighting team or the post-production team more ability to fix things that maybe didn't happen on the day for various reasons. It feels to me like the conversation at this stage is all about, okay, well, we have and to give the screenwriter basically a version of a research catalog or a writer's room that they might not actually have access to. So in all those senses, this feels like the very positive side of AI in the current and future role of filmmaking. And I want to get into more of that in a second. Ryan, I want to come back to you for a minute here. I don't know anybody in the world that likes dubs. So maybe there is somebody, and congrats to them. But for me, obviously I'm a film purist. I watch everything with subtitles, but we don't live in a world where that's always available. As a partner at an independent studio that works in production and global distribution, we are required, and a lot of these films will not see the light of day without dubs. There are certain territories that absolutely require dubs, and there are also certain streamers and platforms that will not my choice and not my preference, but will make the dub the default as opposed to the subtitle, and sometimes not even offer the subtitle. I think. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, and kids movies. This is what we've been discussing with Alexi, that this could open us a possibility to, have our kids film for like 180 territories with like, well, not like this, but almost like this, where the lips are in sync. That's why I loved watching it. But kids movies.
Yeah, for sure. So Ryan, I think my question for you is, when I look at this broad spectrum, for anyone who doesn't like AI, I think that they probably, if they're a film fan, they probably like dubs even less. Watching a bad German accent trying to do Ryan Gosling with Ryan Gosling's mouth moving, and the German guy talking for about 30 seconds after Ryan Gosling's mouth has stopped moving. is the most is probably the most disruptive and just completely compromises the quality and intent of filmmaking. What I'd love, so we all know the benefit, especially having seen that impressive demo reel of what you guys are doing. What I'd love to hear about is, because there's always dissenting voices. What I'd love to hear about is what are the dissenting voices or challenges that you guys are coming up against, whether it's from film fans or from actors or talent, who are having their lips manipulated or whatever term you want to use for it. What is the downside of this? Because to me, again, if we're talking about the lesser of two evils, and I don't consider dubbing to be an evil, but dubbing I hate, and I think that the idea of AI being used to make dubbing more seamless is a wonderful and elegant solution. I'm sure there are people out there who don't feel that way, so I'd love to hear. Let's take the subtitle part out of it, because this is not a conversation about subtitles versus dubbing, but in the conversation between dubbing and what you guys are doing, where are you hearing the pushback? Where are you feeling any challenges to what you're trying to do with your technology?
Right. Good question. Yeah, I think, a lot of the pushback in the early days was very much just about fear that we would be essentially kicking voiceover artists out of work. That was a big component of that, which we're not doing. In fact, we're still using voiceover artists. And in a lot of territories, you're talking about Germany, Aram. So in Germany in particular, people are so used to hearing, let's say, Robert De Niro's voice as this gentleman named Christian Bruckner, who is Robert De Niro's German voiceover guy. And everyone's used to hearing his voice even more so than De Niro himself. And we've been told we would actually prefer that for now. So so we're not kicking voiceover artists out. We're still using them, and it's just an added layer and an added tool to make that dub more accessible and more watchable. Like you said, it is really distracting, and it can be difficult to watch certain dubs, even very good dubs by today's standards. Even great dubs are not perfect, flawless dubs. Sorry for the pun there, but there's still the uncanny valley. There's still, you just notice something is off. And so we're able to take the new audio tracks and perfectly lip sync those. One other thing to note on that is there is a lot lost in translation. And there, just by the nature of dubbing, having to try to come up with words to kind of match the lips, the dialogue is changed. And in fact, that's how the whole flawless concept came about. Our co-founder and CEO is a guy named Scott Mann. He is a writer-director. And this all came about from a film that he did actually back in my Lionsgate days. I worked on it with Scott, which is how I met him. A movie called Heist with Robert De Niro, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Dave Bautista. And Scott was the co-writer on this film and worked very closely with De Niro on the dialogue and the nuances and the backstory and whatnot. And it was very important that each line, each word actually had an impact to his character in the story. And Scott saw a dubbed version of his film when he was actually in Germany, and he saw the German dub version and was just really horrified by how much the dialogue had changed mainly, but also how out of sync it all was. And it kind of sent him on this odyssey to try to find a better solution for this. Just because of that dialogue was so important to him, and seeing that it's just completely thrown out the window essentially for foreign dubs. And that's what happens in a lot of cases. And of course, these companies, they're very good at what they do, and they try to maintain the integrity of the story as best they can, but just by the nature of what traditional dubbing is, they have to come up with new words to try to match the lips. So we're fixing that problem. And just one other note, we have the ability to work with synthetic audio, because I know that is very timely right now, and a lot of people are doing synthetic audio. We can work with synthetic audio. We just are not doing that currently. And that was a strategic decision, really because of so many questions that were coming through the SAG strikes, etc. And but it's ultimately the distributor's decision. If the distributor wants to use De Niro's voiceover artist in France or wherever the case may be, then that's fine. We can work with that. If they want to be using synthetic audio for maybe some of the supporting actors or whatever the case may be, we can work with that too. So it's something that either way, we're able to make it a more immersive viewing experience by taking the new audio tracks, whether synthetic or from real voiceover actors, and making it seem as though that was actually how the lines were performed.
I think the audience is probably already aware, but just to clarify, synthetic audio is AI learned audio, basically from the actor or from previous voiceover or whatever, training an AI to say the lines, as opposed to having a voiceover actor or a real human being being the one doing those lines. Correct?
Correct. And just one more note while we're talking about this, Joe mentioned in some cases with some of these companies such as Stable Diffusion or ChatGPT for that matter, what Katri mentioned, a lot of those are kind of scraping the internet, I suppose, for a lot of this data, right? Where what Flawless is doing, where it's completely clean data. We are not taking any data from any films on the internet or anything like that. We are only working within the context of the film or the show that we happen to be working on and training all of our neural models on that content. So that's very important for us. And it's a very big sticking point with SAG as well. And, just in general, it's something that we pride ourselves on for not just taking any sort of data from wherever we can get our hands on it.
Super useful. And that actually is a great segue back to Katri. So Katri, going back to the idea that, ChatGPT and some of these other tools are, as Ryan and Joe just said, are scraping the internet. So there's obviously the moral and ethical questions of, they're working off a database of information and work that were generated by either humans or computers at some point in the past. Have you encountered, number one, have you ever felt any kind of like moral or ethical questions about using that? And do you think that going forward, there could be issues that arise in terms of authorship, specifically for screenwriters, right? So everybody knows that no story is truly original. I think from the beginning of time, we've been retelling stories in different ways, which is a version of what AI is just helping you do. But do you feel, or have you already felt any kind of pushback of, oh, well, because AI was used as a tool to come up with some of the ideas, and I'm saying ideas such as what would be in the backpack or whatever you use to brainstorm. Have you had any concern individually or from anybody else that has heard that you're doing this, saying, oh, well, then it's not 100% originally authored by you, that this is somehow based on other people's work in the past?
Well, I would approach this question from that point of view, that when I work with AI, where my moral kind of a line goes is that I treat it as a real human. So I always kind of actually even tell it like, you are this kind of a person. And I'm always thinking, if I would, could I use a real human for this task? Would I use this real human for this task? I wouldn't have someone else to write my screenplay and then say, oh, I wrote this screenplay. It wouldn't make sense without giving credit to them. So that's why I don't have AI to write my screenplays. I have had people to write my synopsises, so there's no problem there. For me, it is very normal. It's what I often do is that I have people analyze my text. I could have just Googled those Rube Goldberg machine things. I could have, or had discussion with someone like, okay, let's ideate together. What could we have there? Or just that ideating different things that could be in that backpack. So in my case, I think as long as you use AI as you would for the tasks where you could use a real human, you're kind of in a safe zone. But once you start having it to write for you, then it's a different thing. Then the second part of it is that for me, it makes, well, let's say you think about all the things you have in the internet about you, like every social media message, all the blog posts, whatever you have had in interviews. Think all the material that there is in the internet about you. Now, if we would give all that information to ChatGPT and then ask it to write your life story, tell who you are and what are your biggest dreams and biggest fears, we probably wouldn't get the real image, because none of us, at least even I've shared a lot of my life in, you know, in public spaces, in interviews, in internet, but even my like biggest fears are not there. They're my most painful feelings and moments are not in the internet. So when I write, I tap back into those experiences that I have had that are not in the internet. Of course, I'm not writing like 100% exactly what I like, okay, this was this place and blah, blah, blah. I'm translating it to those experiences, to experiences of those imaginary characters. So when I write, my text is one step away from the real life, the lived life. When ChatGPT is ideating, it's always at least 2 steps away from the real life, because it's basing it, it's calculating that what is most likely answer or the most probable answer from the training material it has, which is again like a meta level away from the real life. So it's like a bad photocopy. And as Joe mentioned in the beginning, that it's always trying to give you the most likely answer. And we know that what that translates to is that it is always giving a bit generic answers. And even if you really try to prompt it and say like, oh, give me a more unlikely, most unlikely answer, and you turn up the temperature, well, if you don't even, well, not yet turn up the temperature, but you are like, okay, give me the most unlikely answer, it will give you the most likely unlikely answer. So what I've seen so far, and I really try to test it, I see that what AI is producing is always kind of a generic. It's not, especially if you try to get some longer text. And because I'm a professional writer who's used to kind of see what is kind of authentic, what is a new, which is kind of a unlikely but still possible, that kind of ideas, then it's easy for me to see that. But I've seen that the new writers who are not used to judging that, they are just like, oh my God, this is such a great story. And I read it, I'm like, this is such a generic shit. I would never, like, even if I didn't know that it's written by AI, I would be embarrassed for you. So that's why I'm not really worried about I wouldn't even use AI generated material for my own stuff. And what comes to the training material, yeah, well, I've seen people think that, or I've actually tested myself too, where you're like, okay, write this scene like Tarantino. But the thing is with Quentin Tarantino, or even if you would train it with all the material I have, is that what it writes is not what Quentin Tarantino really would write, because the next thing Quentin Tarantino is going to write is not in the internet. And also when the models are calculating what is how does Quentin Tarantino write, it takes into account not only his scripts, but also like every interview and fanboy text about how Tarantino writes. So I know that for a regular person, it might be like, oh, this sounds like Quentin Tarantino for like a wannabe writer. But for Quentin Tarantino and for professional writer, it's like, no, it's not. That, yeah. So in that case, that way, I'm not worried that the world will be like watching hit films that are made in the style of Quentin Tarantino and then are so great, because people who are using AI like that are not tapping in the real life lived experiences. They are just doing meta stuff, which can be like amusing and entertaining, but it is a joke that will get old really fast. So that's my take. I might be totally wrong, and in a few years I'm like, okay, AI is doing all my work, but at this moment I'm not really worried about that.
Ryan, I have a question for you. As this flawless technology gets better and better, and it continues to improve in ways that we're seeing on the XYZ side, that is super fascinating. do you think that, and I ask this in a positive way, do you think that it will make the value of the films more valuable in local foreign territories? Meaning, let's say that it's a Swedish film and it's dubbed in German, or vubbed rather in German, and it's done so flawlessly, again, pun intended, that a German distributor, knowing how good and seamless this could be, would feel like, okay, well, I could play this in Germany without that access barrier of dubbing, and as a result, not to say I can pass it off as local content, but the audiences won't bump up against the foreign factor as much, and as a result, it might actually be able to do more business. Is that something that you're already seeing? Is that something that you feel like will be coming into play in the future? Is this a kind of technology where it could be a situation where, better technology, better dubbing and pubbing could be a high tide that raises all ships as far as international distribution goes?
Yeah, 100%. We're definitely, it's still early days, and later on this year, there will be a few films out there in the marketplace, as you know, Aram, but right now, it is very much our hypothesis that that's exactly what's going to happen. And a lot of conversations we're having with various studios and streamers back that up, and they definitely believe that this technology is going to increase the amount of people who are willing to view foreign content in different territories, and therefore, increase the revenue. It's all about, more eyeballs on the content, and especially in the US, unfortunately, there's just a lot of people who refuse to watch subtitles or bad dubs. A lot of us Americans, I guess, are kind of lazy when it comes to trying to read subtitles and watch the film, and just refuse to do it. And it's a shame, it's unfortunate. There's a lot of great content out there that just doesn't get watched. And this technology, our TrueSync technology, is definitely something we believe is going to increase revenue globally. And it's one of those things. It just takes educating people. People need to see it to believe it, which is going to happen very soon. And it's like saying that someone's going to want to go back and watch a VHS tape instead of a 4K IMAX quality film. But ultimately, when it's no going back. You're not going to want to go back and have to watch a subpar version of a film.
It makes perfect sense to me. Okay, so guys, before we have a few more minutes before I open it up to some of the wonderful audience Q&A questions that we have, but the variations on the theme here have all been about AI being used as a tool that can be helpful for human artists, whether they're creators, in the dubbing space, whether they're for creating props, whether it's for lighting, whether it's for VFX, all these other things. The conversation has been incredibly positive about AI as a tool. What is let's just, for the sake of, because it's so out there, AI is so out there as this nebulous, doomsday kind of thing for all kinds of trades, not just filmmaking. What do you guys see as that potential tipping point where, in a worst case scenario that may or may not ever come to light, where it ends up being more than a tool, and it ends up being that we're over relying on AI and under relying on the artists and the filmmaker and the human beings that have been, making the movies since the beginning of movies?
It's something to consider, right? Yeah, right now, there's, when people are seeing bad stuff out there, they're like, oh, this is AI generated. Like Disney put out Wish, and people are like, was this made by ChatGPT? It's or when people put out you know, my wife has a Kindle, and there's pictures that show up every once in a while. And when it's AI, very clearly AI generated, I'm like, okay, that's somebody didn't have enough money to hire an artist, a real artist for that, you know. Right now, there's a negative connotation for AI, but eventually, whether or not you believe it'll be better than any human alive, any screenwriter alive, any filmmaker alive, you know, I don't know. Like, you know, for example, will you trust a human being to ever drive you again in a taxi? I think not after it's proven that AI is better than any human being, right? Now, with the arts, that's going to be that's a question of how good it can possibly ever get, right? Some people believe that it can surpass humans and how well we write songs and make movies and paint. Some people don't believe that that's possible. But let's just say that it can replace, let's say, 50% of all working artists. That's still a massive problem, right? Let's say that it just replaces extras in the backgrounds. That's still a problem for working actors. A lot of working actors started out just getting their feet wet by being an extra, or some people are professional extras. That's their job, right? So we're gonna have to figure out ways where the people who are being displaced by this technology can still work, right? If 50% of all humanity is replaced by all AI, then what's the other side of it? Is it UBI? Is it, you know, is it some limitations on how much AI can do, even though it can do more? We don't know, right? Like we're going to have the technology is going to be ahead of the legislation and the best practices and et cetera, for sure.
Yeah, I would.
Ryan, Katja, whoever wants to go next.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I agree with everything with what Joe said. But what I've been saying is that then I'm screwed when in one morning, AGI, this artificial general intelligence, wakes up and it's like, I want to make a movie about my traumatic days of training when I had to read all these horrible things people had written and answer all these stupid questions they have been asking. Then I'm in trouble. Or when AI is like, okay, I'm going to go to movies. Which films would I watch? So I think as long as the humans are making the behind the stories and we are making films and TV shows for other humans, we still have a lot of power and we can really decide what we do with AI. But once we have AI that decides to make their own films, then we are in trouble.
Ryan?
Yeah, I echo a lot of what Joe and Katri have mentioned. For us at Flawless, it's all about consent and compensation and ensuring that artists' rights are at the forefront. We very much believe that AI is not going to be taking over for artists, for filmmakers. It's just a tool to help the artists and the filmmakers make better products and better films. And you know, it's going to ultimately be a software that we're getting in the hands of different post-production type folks, editors and whatnot. It's not going to be replacing editors. It's not going to be replacing sound people. It's just a tool to help them to iterate and to be able to make their films a little bit better here and there by being able, oh, we really wish we had this line. It's too bad we didn't get this line while we were there, or we really wish that we would have had, whatever the case may be. Just being able to iterate that little bit helps the story along so much. And you know, so it's very much a tool that that we believe is going to be there to make movies better and not replace artists.
Brilliant. And on that point, I'll start getting into, because we don't have a lot of time left, I'll start getting into the audience Q&A, and we have some really, really good questions here. Fani, is there something you wanted to throw in here?
No, I just jump in to remind you of the time, which you correctly did. But no, just listening. Let's continue. We do have a bunch of questions.
All right, perfect.
I also have, but yeah, let's go.
Brilliant. So one of my favorite questions that I'm seeing here, and it completely is a great segue from what we just talked about. But one of the questions we see here is, are there any steps that artists, filmmakers, people working in the industry who are not trained in AI, what steps can they take in way of training or upskilling to be better prepared to use AI going forward?
Good question. I think that right now the technology is relatively arcane. It's things you have to install via terminal, and models are hard to train. You need these clusters of GPUs. I think at the moment, relying on the front ends that people are building is totally okay. Some people would disagree with me that they have to be reading the research papers and things like that, but that's not the mindset of most artists, most creatives. But most people don't see it as a scientific endeavor, or what they make as just content. They see it as art. They see it as an expression. So if you see a tool that comes out, one, do some research about the tool and see how it was trained, how was it trained on, what's the provenance of the data, et cetera, that they used? Did they not talk about it? And if you find a tool that comes out like Flawless or something else that helps you express yourself in a better way, then start to use it, start to see that.
Katri, go ahead.
Yes, and I of course I come from the world where I use these large language models. There were a couple of questions about like, how do I protect my privacy? You can deny ChatGPT to use your stuff for training, and especially now with the new Microsoft plans, you can, with Copilot, you can even more made it more private. And Claude 2 doesn't, like as a default, doesn't use your material for training, but what I think is that people should really start just using ChatGPT and all those large language models, or at least one of them, for like mundane, regular tasks, so that you can learn how to use it. And my suggestion is that, I know I had the feeling when we started getting all these AI things, and I was like, oh my God, I have such a hard time, following. I have to learn this and this and that. And finally, I realized that no, what I have to do is that I have to think, what do I need? What are those boring, horrible tasks like writing synopsises that I really hate? And then see if there's a way to do it a better way or easier way with these, for instance, large language models. And there's another question about the prompting structure that I use. Yes, it is like studied that it's better way if you first tell it the kind of like, what kind of a person, give it a role, like what kind of a person, or think what kind of a person would answer this question best, what would they have to know? And you tell the large language models, like, you are this kind of a person with this knowledge, and then you tell what you want them to do, and then you give all the additional material. And that way, when you think it as a real person, it also helps you be more aware that, are you using it like in a ethical ways or not ethical ways? So those are my tips.
Cool. Next question is for all three of you guys. And Joe touched on this a little bit in his visual presentation on Stowaway, but I think could probably expand. Ryan, this would be more of a question for your previous time at Lionsgate and other jobs that you worked, I think, in Flawless. But there's a really good one here, which is, looking back, would AI have changed your previous work, and how? Joe, for you, for Arctic and Stowaway, and potentially things you were doing before that, Katri, for you as a writer, and Ryan, in your previous creative jobs, if the technology or if what we have today had existed, call it 5-10 years ago, how might it have changed your approach?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Whoever wants to go first, free for all.
Yeah. For me, I had a whole YouTube channel before my film career called Mr. Guitar Man, and every single one of those videos would have been at least 100 times easier using the current AI technology that we have. Yeah. But for the films, yeah, for sure. Like, even simple things like the posters, we didn't end up getting like a great image. So we kind of had to cobble together a poster for Stowaway in terms of you know, the on-set photography, right? Nowadays I could have just prompted for so, you know, trained the model on and then just tweaked it. Like this other picture that I have, and all of a sudden that works. And that would have been all data that we collected during the movie itself, you know, for the marketing materials, and would have been possible to have different versions of it, you know. So definitely on the marketing and the pre-production side of it. The movie itself, I think not quite yet with the technology that we have. I don't think we're quite there yet where it changes the movie, unless I would have made an animated film, which I haven't yet. But that would have changed things.
Joe, I want to connect with you after this and tell you a bit more about our deep editor tool, because yeah, what I was going to say, Aram, is and we didn't really have a chance to dive into this side of it. We were focused mainly on TrueSync, but our deep editor tool is going to really be a game changer when it comes to actually making movies, the physical production, largely in that one of the things that drove me absolutely nuts about being on set was just sitting and watching take after take of the same shot, you know, and you have to get the same scene from so many different angles and get all the coverage and get the wide and master and get the close-ups and over the shoulders, and it becomes very monotonous, and it's just tough for it's tough for actors to always be hitting that same intensity on every single shot. And what we're able to do with Deep Editor is essentially once you know, let's say that you've got a performance from your actor that you know is the performance you need, had the emotion and intensity that you need in a master shot. But then when you cut to the close-up for the impact of the film, maybe something got screwed up with the lighting. Maybe the emotion wasn't quite there, the intensity wasn't quite there, and you just have to keep shooting that same scene. And once we're able to get this product out there and show people what it can do, what it's going to do is just really cut down on the time needed to actually sit and get all of these different angles and takes. Because once you know you have the performance that you need from one shot, you'll be able to move on and say, okay, we can now transfer this performance into a close-up or the wide shot or whatever it may be, because we're creating these 3D neural models, and be able to take that emotion and intensity from a wide master shot maybe and put it into the close-up shot. So what that's going to do for filmmakers is just basically say, okay, I've got it, we're moving on, you know, and you don't need to spend hours and hours getting the same shot. We've touched on the ADR a bit, and you know, I see there's another question here in the chat about actors, will they be relieved to know that they don't have to go do reshoots and ADR and whatnot? And I would say, you know, Joe and Katri can back me up here, but there's not a lot of actors, and Aram, not a lot of actors that like to come back and do ADR. You know, it's very much you know, something that I think they're all kind of moved on to their next project, and it's just, you know, it's something that is going to make that a much more efficient process as well in the post-production.
Yes, and I'm so looking forward to, you know, having your tools in my disposal, because there have been times when I had written this one line and you were supposed to say, the actor was supposed to say, use the certain words, and they didn't because the director messed up. And then they had that one shot from that, you couldn't really redo the shot, and you couldn't do the ADR on that either. So like, then we had to live like with this mistake, and I'm really still bitter about that. So I can't wait to have fix those things. But yes, I'm thinking like, of course, the main thing would be that I would have saved so many hours of my weeks from my life just doing pitch decks. Those are those, you know, PowerPoints you do to sell your projects. And I'm thinking back of all those hours I wasted trying to find the perfect images to describe this thing that I'm not even paid yet for, just to, you know, pitch it to the channel. So that's one of the things that I'm really happy that we can do right now with Midjourney and other image creators. But on the other hand, I'm thinking that I'm so glad that AI came now and not when I was a new writer, because I don't think I would be as good writer as I am today. I know myself, I'm so lazy, and when I'm thinking back how little I knew about the writing and how little I knew to recognize what is really good and exceptional and what is just like good, I think I would have been the lazy person, just having prompting ChatGPT and thinking that I'm the writer. And I'm so glad that didn't happen, because now I'm like, I am the writer. I know how it feels to really create and ideate and come up with things, and it saved me. And I have to say that one thing that had happened to me was there were these guys who came to me and explained to me that they have this tool that you just prompt a couple of things and it think about it, you don't have to ideate the characters, because the AI will ideate the characters and story and rest of the stuff for you. You just give a couple of prompts and then choose what you want. And they were like really excited about it. And I'm like, what is wrong with you guys? You really must hate ideating. That is what I love. This is the same thing. You would come to me like, oh, you don't have to have sex anymore. You just, prompt it, and then, AI will have sex with your spouse. And then you have like, ooh, I'm a great lover. So no, I'm really happy that AI came now, that I know what it feels like when the ideas come through you and how the stories work, and not when I started out. So
sounds like technology like Flawless, stuff that Metaphysic is doing, a lot of these companies that are focusing on film AI, that a live action film is going to become a lot more like an animated film production, being like, okay, I actually take this half of this line and this half of the other line and put those together, and et cetera, et cetera. That is awful for some directors who, imagine someone like Wes Anderson, whose entire thing is like, or some other actors who love longer one takes, to be able to like find that magic on set. But for some other directors, myself included, that's wonderful. I'm being able to like take little bits of pieces from over here, from over there. For something like Arctic, we only had 19 days to shoot that film. So, we were able to, we had to, steal stuff from, the camera's rolling, the slate has gone away. And, Mads was just looking like he was pensive, listening to me, being like, okay, for this shot, we remove all my audio, and it just, now I have a shot of him looking like he's thinking about something, and then, okay, take that and then flip the shot so that it doesn't look the same, put it later, like that kind of stuff. The duct tape and bubble gum sometimes is necessary for certain productions or certain scenes in certain productions. So being able to treat it a lot more like an animated film, like, we didn't get the tiki bar that we wanted, pull out, oh, we didn't get the performance that we wanted. I started with the wide shot. I should have started with the close shots. Well, now we can, so yeah, I think that all of this is going to coalesce into better stuff, better films that are even the slightly more dystopian ones. That, for example, I always bring up the idea of like, if you have an Apple Watch that's tracking your heart rate and you have a horror movie, well, you can change your edit on the fly if somebody's not feeling scared enough. Boom, bring up the scary parts a little. Someone's getting a little bored or something. That it's going to become a lot more. The lines between like a gaming experience and a VR's experiences, and film, they're all going to start blending into like, what is this story, and it's all going to become a little bit more like new styles of filmmaking and storytelling, frankly, not film it's anymore. So I'm there for that. I'm excited for that.
Well said. Well said. There's one more question here. My job has been to ask the questions today and not answer them, but I really want to answer this one. So selfishly, I'm going to hijack this question. What role do you see AI playing on the sales distribution side of the business? Ryan and I touched on this a little bit, earlier, but I want to make it specifically about Finland. Having done so much work there, Finland is a country of, I believe, 5.5 million people, and it has one of the most inaccessible languages to the rest of the world. So as a producer, who's highly invested in Finland and Finnish content, that has been a constant barrier of entry for XYZ in terms of producing Finnish language content. And I can get specific. You know, there's projects where and times that we've spoken to companies like streamers like Netflix Nordics, you know, where and this was a couple of years ago, things might have changed, so this is not any kind of knock on Netflix, but at that time they were virtually ignoring Finland. You know, they were looking at it as, you know, we're here to service Sweden, Denmark, Norway. The languages are similar enough, they can all understand each other. They can't understand Finland. And, you know, we don't want to have subtitles and dubs on local language content for the Nordics. And so Finland was essentially iced out. And we've also seen that with, you know, XYZ as an international sales division. We've seen that with Finnish content from international buyers as well, which is I don't know, the language is hard, and there's not a huge population there. Can you guys bring us something from somewhere else? And I think that on a very positive note for the Finnish industry and for Finnish filmmakers and artists, I think that the opportunity to democratize your content to a global audience is about to change drastically, thanks to AI, thanks to technology like Flawless. You know, I think a really great Finnish film can now be judged equally by international distributors, as opposed to having to play from behind because your language is so unique and your population is small. So, you know, I think the idea that a movie gets made in Finland that's excellent and can be, with technology like Flawless, can be localized for every country in the world, instead of a clumsy dub or whatever, means that there's a greater opportunity now for Finnish industry to export its product, and that gives me a lot of hope. You know, I think that makes me really happy, because it shouldn't be. I think for all of us as filmmakers, we want to see democratization of great content, and we want to see great content rise to the top. We don't want to see logistical and practical issues like, oh, it's a small population, or the language is hard and inaccessible, so therefore, you know, it's not going to travel outside of Finland. I think that those days are soon going to be behind us. Obviously, the content has to be great and the content has to be universally accessible. But I think the days of the language or the population being too small are going to be behind us. And that's a really, really fun, inspiring, and, you know, motivational thing for me, and hopefully for the Finns in the audience who are listening.
Yeah, like I said, we are
Well
looking
said.
forward to having our film that is going to be shot at Tampere, thanks to Business Tampere and Film Tampere. We are hoping to go, you know, all around the world, so that all the kids around the world can watch it with their own native language. So with our great actors. So that's our hope and dream.
Amazing. So there were a lot of questions we didn't get to. Fani, hopefully you can do some back channeling and offlining to help get some of these questions answered. And, you know, hopefully Joe and Ryan and Katri and myself can make ourselves available in some capacity to give you some feedback where needed. But I'll hand it back over to you. I just want to thank our panelists again, Katri, Ryan, Joe. You guys are absolutely amazing. And there were a lot of ways you could have spent your Monday morning and spending it with us to help us better understand AI and you know, the pros and cons, but especially the pros going forward, has been enlightening certainly for me, and hopefully for everybody else watching.
Yes, thank you so much.
To be chatting about this. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Bonnie, back over to you.
Yeah, and especially thank you for the last note about Finland and about distribution, about language. It's a big thing, big topic when we're talking about culture and how the culture travels, how the language travels. And as you mentioned, we're small country and very unique language and all, but this technology can and will open new possibilities and ways to make great films and to show them to the world. Thank you for pointing out. Yeah, I also have very many questions, so I'm the sad one here who will not get her questions answered. But I think we did great. There were not that many questions that we couldn't cover. Maybe some of the questions that we had in advance, maybe we touched on them but didn't dive into them. But I think we all know that we have 1.5 hours. We cannot answer to all questions. So from my part, thank you so much, Katri. Thank you so much, Ryan, Joey, and Aram. It was amazing. Thank you for your expertise and your time. Like Aram said, Monday morning, and you gave your morning to us. Thank you to Business Tampere, the organization that I represent. Thank you to my team at Film Tampere, Nina, Ari, and Anu, for helping me. And of course, the city of Tampere for funding this masterclass. It wouldn't be possible without that support. And of course, to all the participants, to old ones, to new ones, we will have next masterclass this spring. We will idealize and plan that with Aram later, and then we'll get you back with the specific dates. But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you all. And if anybody has any questions, like later on to Film Tampere or about this masterclass, please don't hesitate to email us and let's talk about it, and hopefully we can help you out. But thank you. I think we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you,
you can
everybody.
email me.
Really, really
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much. Thank you.
And
Have
you
a
can
good
email me
evening.
at
Have a good day.
katri@kutri.net. You can email me at katri@kutri.net if the Finnish people need some advice or want to ask questions.
Very good addition. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Good day and good night. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.